Hey everybody, Who's Your Jedi here with another review for you. This time I'm talking about episode 8 of season 1 of Arrow called Vendetta. I've honestly got some mixed feelings about this episode. There were some nice moments here, but there were also some stuff that going on here that just didn't work for me. So, with that said, let's get right into it. All right, the first thing, and this is one of the biggest problems I have with this episode, is that when Helena goes out to kill the head of the Triads, she does not bother to put on her biker helmet, even though it's established the main reason she wears that is naturally to protect her identity. Now, granted, from an emotional standpoint, if we can't see Helena's face during the scene, it's just not going to resonate with us as strongly as it would. But from a logical standpoint, the idea of her not wearing that is it's just absolutely ridiculous. It really, really is. And also, didn't anyone else notice that the Triad guys were more than a little slow than in responding to the fact that somebody just took a crack at their boss? I mean, granted, nobody wants to run towards somebody who's shooting a gun in their direction, but these are trained professional mobsters. You think that they'd get the lead out a little bit. Now this all leads us to the big thing between Oliver and Oliver wanting to train Helena, saying, well, there's a better way to do this and all this other stuff, yada yada yada, and Oliver making a big production about innocence. Well, first of all, and I've seen people commenting about this online, Oliver has a somewhat shaky relationship with innocent people, killing innocent people already. I mean, just look at some of those corporate guys that he took down in the first episode. Now, it's never established for us for sure whether or not those are, genuine criminals or just security guys doing their jobs, protecting their employer from a violent vigilante. And as we are reminded when we meet Nick's widow, that if you kill someone, they don't exist in a vacuum. Even bad people have loved ones and families and all this other stuff. It's like that old quote that every man's death diminishes me. Well, you gotta have to wonder of all the people that Oliver's killed, how many of those guys had kids? How many of those guys had wives and moms and other people who cared about them? Now, granted, some of the people he's taken down, the world's definitely, almost certainly, probably a better place without them. The world's certainly not going to be that much poorer of a place without Nick, his wife regardless. But still. Now, if you take innocence to mean, people who just might get caught in the crossfire, well, like Oliver's mom, I do like that they acknowledge that. I mean, you sleep with a girl who shot your mom, I think she probably owes you an apology under most circumstances. And at least they did have Helena kind of go, oh yeah, sorry about that. Now here, Oliver is on a little bit firmer ground. Now, the big thing here is, though, now that Oliver, he's not quite as ruthless as he was when we first started out. And a lot of that, of course, is the influence of Dig. Dig has pointed out to him, the really bad path he could go down. About, well, I don't think I really need to recap that. Because of Dig's influence, Oliver has learned that I can't go around just killing everybody. He has changed his philosophy from I will kill pretty much anybody who gets in my way to I will only kill if it is absolutely necessary. And while perhaps not the most heroic philosophy in the world, it's certainly an improvement from when he, as I said, like in the first episode, may have been killing people who were not criminals and were just simply guys doing their job. And his relationship with Huntress in this guard, trying to temper her bad habits, her desire to choose vengeance over justice, is something that's a bit of a reoccurring theme with the character of Huntress. We've seen Batman try and do this. We've seen The Question try and do this. We've seen Nightwing try and do this. In fact, this was a major theme in, I believe it was the Huntress Cry for Blood miniseries that really focused on the dynamic between Nightwing and Huntress. Now, sorry if I'm not remembering the exact details of that story too well. It's been a long, long time since I read it, but I think you get the point that what I'm driving at. But the thing about Huntress is that in she does eventually do things like become a member of the Justice League, which ultimately does show that at the end of the day, Huntress is one of the good guys. She's just one of those good guys who's not terribly nice. But Huntress is still very much a long, long way from Justice League material here. But, then again, so is Oliver. So, yeah, let's go on. And I do like that Dig is shown here, once again, saying things to Oliver that are completely right, that are what Oliver needs to hear, even if he doesn't want to hear it. Dig is totally, totally doing his job here. And, it is like Oliver, he does say, Oliver does not want to see Helena as she really is. He does kind of feel like the universe owes him one. And I've seen some people complaining about that too, like, well, oh, gee, he's the son of a billionaire. What does he get off thinking that the universe owes him anything? Well, he did sort of see his father kill someone, then commit suicide, and then get stranded on an island for 5 years, get tortured, and had God only knows what else horrible, horrible thing happen to him. So I kind of think that sort of wipes the slate clean on being a rich party boy douchebag, which at the end of the day is certainly not an acceptable sort of thing, but is pretty small potatoes to people killing each other and being tortured. So yeah, I can kind of see why after everything that he's been through, Oliver might sort of feel like the universe owes him a little something. But again, this is another very bad line of thinking that Oliver does fall into. And, I like that. I like that he's not above these failings, that he's not above these mistakes. And that, most of all, he's not above not listening to perfectly good advice when he hears it because, well, let's face it, haven't all of us done that at one time in our lives? Now, granted, it's not that Dig is above criticism here. He makes a big snit about Oliver telling Helena his name, even though if Helena was going to become a part of Oliver's life on a regular basis, it's not like she wouldn't have been introduced to him at some point, and that at some point Oliver may have introduced her to him as his associate. Also, if Dig was going to make such a big deal about Helena not even knowing about his existence, he was under no obligation to reveal himself in that scene that he did. He could have simply just left out the back door and come back later and talked to Oliver in private, or gone outside and called Oliver on his phone, or something like that. Again, there are a lot of things Dig could have done in that scene if he was really that concerned about protecting his secret identity, shall we say. So, yeah. But at the end of the day, Oliver at least trying to spare Helena from making these mistakes, from eventually, and quite possibly, even taking the life of a completely innocent person. You see, this is what really ultimately separates Helena and Oliver at the end of the day. Oliver is making what really is a heroic choice. He is making the choice to do what is reasonably the right thing. It doesn't work out terribly well for him, but he is at least making the effort. He is choosing justice rather than vengeance. Now, you can kind of make you can question whether or not Oliver should have let Helena kill her dad. Now, granted, Frank Bertinelli was obviously a bad guy. And I think maybe Oliver would have had a little bit better luck if he told Helena, not so much you would regret killing innocents, because no way or shape or form is Frank Bertinelli an innocent. I think he might have had a little bit better luck saying, part of you would regret it, part of you would eventually hate, part of you would ultimately still hate yourself for killing your father, even as angry at him as you are. Now, granted, that could have totally blown up in Oliver's face, and if you stop and think about it, it's actually not. Well, basically, Helena's enough of a wild card that that's the sort of thing that could really go either way. So I can see why Oliver might have chosen to not go down that road. And hey, speaking of innocent people, have anyone else noticed that the people in the whole criminal underworld thing going on in Starling City who are the most observant of the safety of innocent people apparently seem to be the Triads? The Triads try to reason with Frank that they're not responsible for killing him. You know, they try to avoid the gang war. When the gang war does break out, rather than this whole thing about how there's going to be blood flow to the streets and innocent people getting killed all over the place, they choose to simply go to Frank's house and try and kill him, and only succeed in killing guys who are members of his organization. You know, because mobsters are generally in the habit of not employing private security. They generally want to be protected by people who are members of their organization. So really, the Triads are basically the only people on this show who you can say have probably not killed anybody innocent. At least on camera. I mean, I really doubt that the Triad guys are in their off-duty time ringing bells for the Salvation Army. But still, that is, I think, worth noting. And speaking of the Triads, does it just seem a little like, to me, like these guys, apart from the whole not killing innocent things, are really not handling this whole situation very well? I mean, I've already criticized them for being a little slow to deal with the person that tried to assassinate their boss. The leader guy of the Triads, apparently, despite being sent to do business in America, does not speak English and requires an interpreter at all times. Also, what seems to be less than about 24 hours after he's almost assassinated by who knows who, the Triad leader guy leaves his most competent and dangerous henchman who knows where, and this ultimately ends up with him getting killed. You know, I mean, seriously, where was China White during that? I mean, granted, she's got to sleep and all this other stuff at some point, but, you know, really, you'd think that shortly after somebody tried to murder you that you'd want to keep your number one bodyguard and enforcer at close hands at all times for a while. And speaking of which, wouldn't it really be simpler just to put China White in charge? I mean, she speaks English. She's obviously very good at her job. And, okay, you know what? I think we're just going to leave it there. But again, China White, if I'm correct, got, what, like 2 lines this entire episode? Again, this show is just so criminally underutilizing Kelly Hu. It's not even funny. Now, just looking at my notes, continuing to talk about Huntress. Now, I did like that we do see her using the crossbow and talking about how she likes the color purple. Of course, the crossbow is the signature weapon of Huntress, and her costume has traditionally contained a great deal of purple. And just for the record, I personally prefer the 90s Huntress costume over any of the others, simply because it's the one that was the most practical, and the one that they have her running around these days has a big hole in the center that shows off her abs. I mean, it's even stated explicitly in the comics that she has that there because, and I quote, she does 700 sit-ups a day, despite that being insanely impractical for so many reasons I can't even begin to count. But yeah. So let me see here. Oh yeah, let's briefly talk about. No, we'll come back to that later. So let's talk about the scene at the restaurant. Okay, just the fact that the way that virtually everybody in that scene was really just overreacting horribly, to me, it was almost laughable. You know, Helena ends up in a snit over the whole thing because even though she's the one that invited Laurel and Tommy to join them. Now, granted, she hadn't know that Laurel was Oliver's ex, but still, if you invite two additional people to join you on your romantic date, then you have to expect that a little bit of awkwardness is going to occur. And then there's the whole thing of you've known Oliver for what, all like 48 hours or so, and now you're getting all upset and jealous that Oliver may still have some lingering feelings for a woman he admitted to you in the past was in a relationship with him that was getting serious, but she's obviously there with another man, and he's there with you and has, genuinely opened himself up to you. Now, granted, Tommy also had a pretty ridiculous overreaction to the situation. But, you can kind of understand that he would be a little embarrassed and a little bit reluctant to go and ask Oliver for something like this. He even says he doesn't want to, kind of be a pauper. He doesn't want to have to come to his friend with his hat in hand. And it's an understandable feeling. But I do like that Tommy quickly realizes, I was stupid. He goes and apologizes to Laurel. They have a genuinely very sweet moment. And honestly, I think that was really one of the highlights of this episode. As I've said, Tommy has really started to come into his own as a character recently, and I'm really enjoying that aspect of his character. I think it makes him a much, much stronger addition to the cast than we might have suspected from the earlier episodes. And just going back to that restaurant thing, the idea that Oliver was trying to manipulate Helena by telling her the truth about Sarah. Okay, that's bull right there. Oliver was trying to explicitly show her that he was willing to put his cards on the table. Now, granted, he didn't tell her about Laurel, but she really wasn't really relevant to what was going on at the time. Sarah was relevant because she was this really horrible pain that Oliver has to live with, similar to the way that Helena's pain about her fiance. So, yeah, that... Now, there was one other thing that I almost forgot to talk about in regards to the Triad guys. I like that the Triad leader guy, before he dies, says, if you set out on a mission of vengeance, you should dig 2 graves, one for your enemy and one for yourselves. Now, this and variations of it have been used for a long time across a variety of mediums. I'm sure I've even heard it in like 1 or 2 westerns. But as I understand it, this quote is believed to have originated with the famous Chinese philosopher Confucius. So it's actually a little bit of clever writing that a Chinese person would choose to invoke that particular quote under those particular circumstances. And it was also pretty funny that Helena turned that back on him by saying, I don't speak Chinese, so I'll just assume that was you saying goodbye, and then shot him. I have to admit, that made me laugh. Now, let me bring this all brings me to the my other big problem with this episode, and that is, of course, the question of why in the world did Frank Bertinelli keep that laptop? I mean, it's literally the silver bullet that could send him to prison for the rest of his life. I mean, seriously, dude, throw it in a garbage compactor, throw it in the ocean, burn it. Why in the world would you keep something like that just sitting around? It makes no logical sense whatsoever. And, speaking of which, why didn't Helena just go back to the FBI and start over giving them information? I mean, she's the daughter of the guy who's in charge of the syndicate. If she got the information once, surely she could get it again. So, yeah. At the end of the day, though, I think the way they handled Huntress, while not without his flaws, at the end of the day was a pretty good story. Oliver really just wanted someone who could understand him, who understood what he had been through. But in the end of the day, Helena was just too far gone. He even said that she's gone over the edge. That reminds me of one of my favorite quotes from one of my personal heroes, and that's Hunter S. Thompson. And he wrote, "The only people who truly know where the edge really is are the people who've already gone over it." And in Helena's case, I think it's pretty undeniable that that's true. Now, I have absolutely no doubt that we will be seeing Huntress again someday in the future, and I have high hopes that we'll see her come around to the side of the Angels fully at some point. But in the meantime, she still bodes as an interesting character, somebody who we definitely should look forward to seeing again, and somebody who, in many ways, as either an ally or as an enemy, could pose a really serious challenge to Green Arrow. So, yeah, again, this episode had its flaws, but it also had its strong points. Definitely looking forward to the next episode. This is, I believe, going to be our last episode before we go on the winter hiatus. But from what I've heard, this sounds like it's going to be a really great one. Anyway, folks, that's all I have for you this time out. As always, please comment, rate, and subscribe. And, of course, you can follow me on Twitter at Hoosier Jedi. Until next time, take care and have a good one.